Hey, how's it going, everybody? Sean here from Zoobox. Got another off-the-cuff movie review. Today we're going to be talking about the recently released Alex Garland film, Civil War. So I'll talk briefly in the beginning here. No spoilers. I may end up spoiling stuff. I'm not 100% sure how the conversation is going to go. We'll see what comes out of me. Because I'm kind of two minds of this movie. I have so much to say about it. There's so many things to discuss. And also, I also have the intense feeling of I cannot be bothered. Like, it would be so fucking tedious to walk through the elements of this movie that basically reveal that it is exactly the opposite of what it's being sold as. Anybody that tells you that this is some sort of impartial Rorschach test of a movie they're out of their fucking minds, and they have basically a form of confirmation bias. They don't want to think of themselves as people that are like hateful or that have intensely negative feelings about like half the country. So this is a way for them to be like, oh, look, we're just kind of like, these are just thought experiments. These are just interesting. I mean, everybody hates fascism and authoritarianism. I mean, these people could be anybody. They don't use terms like left and right in this movie, so that means it's impartial. They don't talk about Democrats and Republicans, so that must mean it's impartial. Give me a fucking break. Every single thing in this movie is coded from a left perspective, and honestly, towards the end of the movie, it is a violent, progressive, wet dream of like what you definitely think people feel about President Trump, and if President Trump gets in the White House. Yeah, I guess I'm just gonna start spoiling shit. So anyways. Yeah, Trump is like, it's Trump. Nick Offerman is supposed to be Trump. He's supposed to be Trump from the moment the film starts. The film starts with the president basically practicing a speech he's about to give about a military campaign and a military victory. And he starts using like phrases that are very Trumpian, like the greatest military achievements in mankind's history, those kinds of things. And it's very, very fucking obvious that that's who it is. It's also dropped that he took a third term as a president because it was a wartime. It was, what else? He disbanded the FBI. He thinks journalists are enemies of the people. And if you go into D.C., his soldiers will shoot you. They consider you an enemy combatant. Things like, just very subtle touches like that, just very subtle things. To suggest that this is Donald Trump. Like, yeah, it's not like they're like beating you over the head with it. It was insane. It was insane. Like, as the movie went on, it got more and more intense in its like partisanship and more obvious. Because, it tries to kind of come at the story. It's very meandering. It's very supposed to be kind of ponderous, maybe even thoughtful to one degree. It's about the importance of journalists and about the importance of their work, especially in times of great strife, trauma. They have to live through these things so that we might be able to see them, so that we can be an informed populace. They're all very jaded and very serious. Like Kirsten Dunst's character, Lee, is like a caricature. She is not very good in the movie, in my opinion, but she's also not given anything very good to work with. Like, the dialogue that she has to say is some of the most, like, on-the-nose, dumb bullshit. It's like almost like somebody reading out of a book about what it's like to be a wartime journalist. Like, this would be the editorial description of a wartime journalist and their disposition. And she's just over it. She's over it. She's jaded. This machine, being part of it. Ugh. I will say this, though. Some of the things I did like about the movie, I thought it was shot very well. I really loved the look of the film. I think some of the war sequences, like the battle sequences, are executed very well. Made me laugh a few times when you start seeing the makeup of some of the soldiers and the types of soldiers that they choose to have do certain things. Seemed a little pointed, in my opinion. Maybe that could be me reading a little bit into it, but I was like, I don't know. Everything else is so goddamn on the nose, so obvious. It wouldn't shock me if you thought you were doing this, thinking that it was subtle or something. Like, holy shit. But yeah, like Garland, just like the pretentiousness just fucking drips off of this thing all over the place. It's just so inane and pedantic, and it's like somebody that's kind of like stupid thinks that they said something very deep, and you can't really shake that feeling for most of the movie. It's just what it feels like the whole time. The whole time I was just sitting there waiting for a reason to care about anything. Like I said, the characters are pretty empty. They're kind of empty vessels. If there is one character that you're supposed to care about the most, and maybe you would empathize with the most just because of the nature of her character and the situation, is there's a young photojournalist. She's like new. She's like an amateur, and somehow she talks these world-class war journalists into taking her along on this ride, even though they had met like 10 minutes before. It's just stupid. It's very contrived. I mean, but things like that, like I could let something like that go, especially if the rest of the movie was like good, because then you just wouldn't care. You'd be like, okay, whatever. Yeah, that's a little contrived and silly, but it works. It sets things up in motion in a way that I can appreciate to facilitate, the rest of the movie. But that's not what happens here. It's, it's weird. Honestly, it's kind of a forgettable movie too. And I think a lot of that is because it has very little to say beyond the obvious. So it just kind of doesn't stick with you. Like, you've heard this before. You've had this lecture before about how you're a bad person or something. It is, I don't know. I really don't understand people watching this and thinking that it's like, oh, it really tells you more about your own politics. Oh, because this is a perfectly neutral movie. They don't use terms like left and right and Democrat and Republican. I mean, who knows who these people are that they're meeting out in the road? And all these redneck hillbillies that are, lynching people and and forming militias and stuff. They could be anybody, dude. They could be Antifa. No. And they pay lip service to that because the journalists, they want to prove that the journalists are so, based, so jaded and neutral that they make fun of like the commies up in Portland or something. Like, that's your one criticism of the left, is that they that there's commies up in Portland and they're annoying. Okay, guys. I was watching, there was an interview Garland did, and it kind of like gives away where he's coming from as a storyteller with this movie. He's like, the worst manifestations on the right are when like they're violent and they're authoritarian and they want to force people to live their lives as they would like them to live, and it's just really awful stuff. And then in the inverse, you have on the left, and when they manifest their worst behaviors, they can be smug. That's it. That was his big criticism of the left. Like, when some of their worst impulses are to be smug, not to also be authoritarian and fascist. Like some political wing owns like the patent on that. Like, nobody else could ever be like that. The idea that left-wing fascism isn't a fucking thing is a joke. It's ahistorical. It's retarded. It's retarded. Like, for Alex Garland to have this perspective, to me, is just so odious and disgusting. And like I said, he's like, it's very childish, very pedantic. Like, really? Like, are you not familiar with the last 150 years? Are you not like paying attention to what's going on in your own fucking country, asshole? These people are so insulated from the consequences of the things that they support. It is so frustrating. And that's kind of, at the end of the day, how Civil War made me feel. It was more just like kind of frustrating. I was hoping, I had hopes that it wasn't going to be like that. When I saw how upset some of like the blogosphere, the film Twitter was, that the movie was not like an angry screed against right-wingers, I was like, oh, well, maybe it actually will be impartial. Like, all the right people are kind of upset about it. I was like, well, maybe it will be impartial. But it's not. It's not. Those people are just retarded. They don't... If they were just paying attention to the movie and not like desperately needing pieces of dialogue to spell it out for them, what the movie, like what the intentions of the film are, they would have gotten exactly what they wanted. Like, you know, listen, Trump gets executed at the end of the movie. Like, you got what you wanted. The liberation movement, or whatever the fuck they're called. I can't even remember the names of the factions, because the movie just doesn't spend a lot of time getting into that stuff. Honestly, it could have used like a 20-minute like Ken Burns style documentary that precedes the rest of the movie. I understand that would have been maybe a little awkward, but the way they went about it just makes it very unsatisfying, and it makes it hard to care about anything. Makes it hard to care about anything other than the ideas, okay? Other than the ideas and how important journalists are. Do not destroy my raised gardens, sir. Got a little boy. He's running around, about to start a civil war in this house. Digging out my tomato plants. But anyways, I lost my train of thought, but that's pretty much it. I know that was kind of rambling and all over the place. If you haven't seen the movie, I doubt you got very much out of that. But let me tell you, it's just bad. It just wasn't good. It just wasn't good. Incredibly middling, mediocre, wild disappointment. I actually was kind of disappointed. Like I said, I thought maybe, maybe it's actually not bad. I was wrong. It's just not good. It thinks it's very profound, though. I can tell you that. If anybody likes Civil War, I can tell you it's Civil War itself. It's a big fan.